All right, let's bring you this discussion now. A recent report by the International Labour Organization has revealed that over 70% of the global workforce is exposed to risks associated to climate change. ILO is urging governments to act as workers, especially the world's poorest, are now more vulnerable than ever to weather extremes compared to the general population. For more on the story, we're joined this afternoon by Dr Manal Azzi. She is team lead on occupational safety and health at the International Labour Organization, and she joins us from Geneva this afternoon. Doctor, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us here in Johannesburg. In fact, we've just had a discussion here in our studios in Johannesburg about the increases in the levels of skin cancer we are seeing here in South Africa, in part associated with climate change. I take it that's part of the kinds of discussions you're having.
Yes, definitely. Thanks so much for that question. Thank you for giving the International Labour Organization the time to hear the new data that came out of our report that we released yesterday. So when we're looking at climate change, we're looking at a number of hazards that are affecting workers globally across many sectors and regions, obviously. So excessive heat is one of the main concerns, but as you mentioned, solar ultraviolet radiations are also a huge concern. And we see around 20,000 deaths annually just from the occupational exposure from non-melanoma skin cancer due to ultraviolet radiation. And one of the key aspects of that is the interlinkages between the various hazards from excessive heat to agrochemical use, vector-borne diseases, air pollution, ultraviolet radiations, which makes it a little bit more complicated to deal with the issue.
So part of the discussion we have insofar as this issue is concerned, Dr. Azzi, is whether employers and governments alike are doing enough for laborers that are and workers that are the most at risk. And for us here in South Africa, we're talking about people who work on farms, those who work in construction. Are you seeing corporates coming to the fore and saying these are the steps that we're taking to protect our workforce?
Definitely. I think what we're seeing, and even more now, is a range of policy responses. So we're seeing legislation change, of course, but also technical guidance given to employers and to enterprises that they can actually implement, that really go through the detail of what we're talking about. Are we setting maximum limits in temperature? What does that mean for outdoor temperature, for indoor temperature? What is the difference between high intensity work, low intensity work? What temperature is acceptable? What kind of real solutions we can look at? What can we eliminate, substitute, and also what are the technical engineering controls, but also administrative controls, like giving longer rest breaks during the hottest times in the day, providing proper hydration, and also proper personal protective equipment to their workers. So what we're seeing is, most of these hazards aren't new. Lots of countries, tropical countries, have been at the hotter end of the world for the longest of times. But we're just seeing that this is spreading across bigger regions, and they're changing. The seasonality of different vector-borne diseases is changing because of this climate change, and also the extreme weather events, more flooding, sometimes hurricanes, droughts. So they're also affecting the way we work, and employers have had to step up because they're losing workers, they're losing productivity, and generally the social protection and health systems are covering for this burden. So they have had to put in place or follow at least national guidance on how to manage and prevent some of these hazards, because one death is too many, and many of the diseases we're looking are chronic. We're looking at 26 million people today living with chronic kidney disease due to exposure to excessive heat during their working lives.
I can't imagine that that's true for all countries, Dr. Azzi. That countries across the board are taking the kinds of steps that you're describing. Because I imagine it comes at a great cost to not take those steps because of the loss of workers, and that's putting it very crassly. But it also comes at a great cost to actually make sure that those steps are enforced.
Absolutely, absolutely, and this is why we found the need for this global urgency to discuss this, because we often think this is a problem elsewhere, or it's not affecting me, or it's only affecting 5% of my working people, or only in specific sectors. What the report shows is that this has become globalized. It is affecting most people. We're seeing a lot of interest, but there's a lot yet to be done, obviously. But there are good examples out there that we need to take up. Again, poverty, the variations in access to a lot of the health surveillance, the setting of occupational exposure limits, the recognition of some of these diseases in the list of occupational diseases compensation, even basic things like providing sun cream at workplaces or clean water at workplaces or any kind of proper ventilation. This is costly, and yes, not everybody is stepping up as they should. This is the hope. The more data we have, the more advocacy, the more we're seeing the cost of inaction that is even more detrimental. But we're not all in the same pace, in the same race, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine as climate change accelerates, it becomes harder and harder for countries to keep up, right? And there are several issues. We're not just talking about the harmful rays of the sun here or the dangers of flooding, for example. There are several dangers related to climate change that are coexisting at the same time. There's UV radiation, there's air pollution. You've written, Dr. Azzi, about the dangers of growing pesticide use for example, agricultural workers. So all of these various issues are facing a particular segment of workers at the very same time.
Absolutely, and that's the wonder of the situation, this accumulation. So we already know that 2.4 billion workers are working in excessive heat at one point in their time every year. And these workers are not just being exposed to this excessive heat, they're also mixing this with air pollution. 1.6 billion people work outside exposed to air pollution. We have over 890 million people in agriculture globally exposed not only to UV radiation, air pollution, and excessive heat, but oftentimes to increased use in pesticides, because pesticides have become less efficient due to this increasing in temperatures. So yes, that's why the problem is more and more difficult to deal with, because we're targeting different hazards in the workplace.
So in terms of the kinds of conversations you're having as ILO, is there a way for countries to report back? Is there an accountability mechanism for countries that work in particular sectors to say, we have now done A, B, and C?
Excellent question. Two things I can say on that. The ILO recognized a safe and healthy working environment as a fundamental right as of 2 years ago. This means the ILO's fundamental conventions on occupational safety and health are now applicable to all countries in the world, whether they have ratified them or not. They now need to report back on the ILO on progress made, if they haven't ratified these, on all the provisions of these basic principles and conventions of these fundamental rights. And therefore there is an obligation, and it will be, including all these climate change related hazards and measures to control them. So that is there. Second point, given the importance of this issue, it was decided that a tripartite meeting will be held in 2025, including employer representatives, worker representatives, unions globally, and governments, ministries of labor here at the ILO, to discuss policy recommendations for the future on the impact of climate change on occupational safety and health. Yeah.
So if you talk about sanction and accountability mechanisms, Dr. Azzi, is it about us doing the right thing as countries and not so much about a sanction?
Yes, I mean, the ILO, the normative body of the ILO, does not impose sanctions per se, but it gives the floor for unions, for example, to complain about the lack of implementations of certain conventions that are ratified or that are fundamental. And then there is a process of dispute resolution that is taken up here to help support and a supervisory mechanism to support countries to make sure that their national legislation legislation translates these international standards and provisions. But it's not, in an international legal entity with enforcement and compliance requirements.
Still, incredibly important conversations. Dr. Manal Azzi, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us there from Geneva this afternoon.